All right, everyone, welcome to the kind of roundtable we've got, really focusing on utility connections today, electricity, water, sewer, gas, electric. We have an amazing guests with us, Florentine and Greg. I'm going to get into their bios in a second, but I think this is going to be content that you guys are going to really, really find valuable as you start the planning phases of your ADUs, because utility connections represent certainly a lot of complexity on a project. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different price points in terms of, what options you choose. So we're going to try to give you some insight and help clear up some of the confusion that homeowners are seeing. So before we get into that, I just want to share a little bit of what's new. We have some new projects wrapping up, which are really great. This was a 900 square foot ADU that clients of ours just finished in San Diego, and we've got a fun video tour, so you guys can look for that on YouTube as well. And here are some of the interior shots, and this one just really, really turned out beautifully. So we have some happy clients, and we're really excited for them to be able to move their children into this unit. This is actually a unit of Florentine's, so I wanted to shout out for her. Florentine, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on here?
Sure. This is actually an attached garage. This was Maxable Space had done the plans for this project, and we're handling the construction side of it. But it's a really fun project because in the designs, we've actually opened up the ceilings. And so it's a small space. It's about a 400 square foot garage, but with those vaulted ceilings, it really opens the space up quite a bit. So this was a photo that was taken shortly after the doors were installed. And this is the side of the property. It's going to open up onto just a real small little patio space, but it's going to be a wonderful, inviting space, and it's all windows. So they'll have their own private little patio with all windows facing out to their outside space. So the clients have been absolutely wonderful to work with. It's been a really great working relationship. We've been loving every minute of working on this project with them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it come to fruition. I think it's going to be beautiful once it's done. And then this was another project that recently wrapped up with another GC partner of ours. So again, just a small 1-bedroom unit, but really like how they kind of decorated it and made it their own. And then we also announced Maxable's ADU of the year. The general contractor on this one was Assist You to Build, based in San Diego. And that general contractor really made this project come to life. And so huge shout out to Bruce Kaler, who led that project. I think his team just did an absolutely fabulous job. And it's really fun to see these units, go from 2D plan sets to the real deal, which is, my favorite part of my job, certainly. So, okay, so let me introduce today's experts. We've got Greg Popovich. He is such a knowledgeable general contractor, and he runs Goldbar Builders, which is based in the Bay Area. They have done really focused on ADUs, but they've done literally every type of construction you can probably imagine. And Greg is just such a wealth of information, so I'm really excited to have him on. Greg, do you want to say anything about Goldbar Builders and your expertise?
Well, thank you, Caitlin. Goldbar Builders is a design to build firm. So we go all the way from design all the way through build, and have really enjoyed our relationship with Maxable. What we've done in the past is Caitlin hit it right in the head. We've done all this, everything from property development, which can equal into the thousands of lots, into custom home development up to 22,000 square foot customs, commercial, industrial, hotels, motels, etc. But what we've decided to do as we've gotten older, I'm 58 now, I just had my birthday, was to focus on giving back. And so by doing ADUs, we've entered the affordable housing realm for either senior citizens or disabled adult children. We build ADUs for a gamut of people. Some people just for rentals, and which opens up the affordability issue in the San Francisco Bay Area, where we focus. We're Northern California, and cover all the way from the peninsula all the way up East Bay. We're doing one in Clayton right now, all the way up to Fairfield. So we go all the way around the Bay, and that's our company.
Wonderful. Yeah, not your first rodeo.
No. Not by any means.
And then I'm thrilled to introduce Florentine as well. I've had the pleasure of working with Florentine for, gosh, over a year now, Florentine. And it's not too often that you see women in construction. So I always love to shout out and lift up other women who are in this space, because it's just great to see your perspective. And Florentine is doing some really amazing things with Sidekick Homes. And so Florentine, do you want to describe a little bit about Sidekick and what you guys are up to in LA?
I absolutely will do. And I will put in a plug if there are any women that are looking to get into the construction or home building industry. I highly encourage it. It's a great field to be in. And we definitely, could use more women and women's perspectives. So yes, Sidekick Homes was really, launched based on wanting to tackle this housing crisis that we're facing in California. And I think that's very similar vein with a lot of the ADU builders in the space. And I'm actually going back to my construction roots. So my very first job was in construction. When I was 14 years old, I started working with my dad. And so I had, by the time I was graduated high school, I had a really good grip on residential home building, everything from foundations to final finishes. So I'm really coming back to my roots with Sidekick Homes. We are an ADU home builder. That is our primary business. Our team members do have extensive experience with home building as well as apartments. And so very well qualified. We're very much looking at the client experience from beginning to end. So we handle everything from, design through construction, and are really going after the client experience and making sure that, construction can be messy, it can be full of unknowns. And we're trying to make that as smooth and seamless of a process as possible for our ADU clients.
Amazing. Thank you guys both for sharing your wisdom and expertise today. Having your perspective is just so valuable for homeowners. So I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of this webinar, which is talking about specifically utility connections. And I think even before we dive into some of these topics, it would be great if you guys could give us an overview, because I think electricity is one of the utilities maybe there's some nomenclature around that people are confused about as well. So if you could kind of give us like a broad perspective of some of the terminology before we even dive into the questions. Florentine, if you could kick us off, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things just to know with electricity is sometimes people get the meter versus the panel mixed up. So I like to define what those things are. So there's a supply line that comes from the power lines that you see in front or in back of your property, or maybe they're underground, that bring power to your property. That's your main supply line, and it will connect to a meter that allows the power company to calculate how much energy you're using and send you a bill for that energy usage. So that's your meter. Then there's your electrical panel, and this is where all the breakers are for all the different lines that are going to go throughout your house. And so there typically will be, a line that will go to your bathroom, or a line that will go to your kitchen, or one that's for your appliances, one that's for your lighting, however your electrician has laid those out. But those are two separate things. So one of the conversations we have is around the meter. And will you need more power coming into your house? Do you want to be able to have separate meters so that the person in the main house and the person in the ADU get a separate bill? Typically, it's up to the power company to determine how many supply lines they're going to bring in. And in Southern California, what we're finding both with LADWP and SoCal Edison is that the power company usually is only going to provide one supply line. They're not going to provide a separate supply line for the ADU. What they can do, though, is bring the one supply line in and have a sub-meter so that you can meter both of those differently. Now, there is some cost to doing that upgrade. So, it could be, $5,000 or more to do an upgrade like that. So it is a bit of an expensive decision, but sometimes it makes sense for the homeowner. And I think we can probably get into a little bit deeper conversation about what would the pros and cons be of having a separate sub-meter. Separate from the sub-meter, though, is the panel. And again, that's where the power is going out to supply power to all of the different places within your home. When it comes to the electrical panel, in most cases, you're going to have a separate panel for the ADU. It might be located in or on the ADU or on the exterior, usually of the main house, but it has to be accessible without having to enter the primary residence. And the reason for that is if you have two different households, right, and one household needs to turn power off or power has gone off and they need to check their breaker panel, you don't want to be dependent on having to go into another unit. So the panels are typically always going to be separate. Even if they're both on the main house, it has to be accessible to the people that are in the ADU. So I just like to make those distinctions because a lot of times electrical panel and electrical meter, people get those a little bit mixed up.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that adds to the confusion here is that different jurisdictions are requiring totally different things in this, right? Like Greg, we were talking yesterday about, some Bay Area jurisdictions requiring, I think you had said to go all electric, and then there's places in San Diego that aren't requiring that. So that kind of adds, the individual jurisdiction is going to add additional complication to that.
Some of the jurisdictions are in putting in what's called a reach code. So you have your normal codes that you're very familiar with. And what the reach code is that they add additional restrictions on top of what the restrictions already are. And let's use San Jose for an example. They've done reach codes where it's all electric. There's no gas that can be included in the ADU at all, or in any new construction, including restaurants at this point. So San Jose is an all electric city. And so that's one of the things that can come into play, because with the panels or the meters or things like that, you definitely need to upgrade your service to accommodate the amount of power that you're going to be required to use, which can be quite costly. I just today had a conversation with the gentleman in charge of the reach codes and showed him how they're not helping to make ADUs affordable. They're actually adding cost upwards of $5,000, in some instances up to $10,000 onto the cost of the ADU in order to comply. The one thing about submeters that I'd like to add is that there's aftermarket submeters as well. And a lot of times the homeowners in Northern California anyway have done the research on these submeters, and what they found are very inexpensive submeters. What we've found is that they are not reliable, they don't work, they're very expensive to install, and they're just not worth buying a very inexpensive submeter. So it's an aftermarket meter, it's not coming from the utility itself. So we found some meters that are quite sufficient. You can read them on your smartphone. They're very simple. You just have to do the calculation and tell your tenant or whoever's living in your ADU how much they owe on your electric bill. So that type of submeter is something that you do inline. It's not even necessarily through the power company. And to do something like that, you'd be more in the $1,000 range installed. So that's something that is another type of submeter on top of the submeter that we've already discussed. So as you can see, and what Florentine's pointed out is that power is quite an extensive issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, I'd love to get, if there's a product recommendation you have on that aftermarket submeter, I'd love to make that available to people watching this. So we'll put some resources in the description below for you guys to kind of hook you up after the fact. So it seems like, for a lot of people, building an ADU is, an opportunity for passive rental income. And so to really understand what those expenses are important. And, this is a topic, I feel like we could just go 1,000 miles deep on, honestly. One of the conversations we were having with an investor recently who has 2 single family zone properties, both with ADUs on them now, and he's renting all the units, but because it's really there's only one meter, those units, even though they're 2 separate units, are being put in a higher electricity bracket. And so those clients are being charged more for their electricity than what they should be being charged for. And so utilities is something I know that the Casita Coalition is working on this year to try to make some improvements from a legislative standpoint to help homeowners out with some of these issues that we see arising, which is exciting. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit.
Can I mention really quick, Caitlin, before we move on, when we're talking about renting a property out, I think that's where there really are, you know, it is something that clients should think about. Do we want the tenants to pay their own utilities, or do you want to charge for the utilities separate? And then how do you treat that in your lease, right? Now you really should have a professional looking at your lease and how you're charging back utilities. Or are you doing an all-inclusive rent, right? Are you saying, okay, it's going to be all-inclusive of utilities? And then there's ramifications to that we wouldn't have anticipated, like right now during COVID, where people are having, you know, this rent amnesty, right? Or, you know, or what is it, an eviction moratorium. So all of a sudden, if you can imagine, if you are the property owner, not only are you maybe not receiving rent, but you also might be now responsible for a utility bill that you're also not receiving payment on. Or similarly, if there's rent control in the area that somebody lives in, and you're only able to raise the rent by a certain amount, if the utilities are going up at a faster rate, you're now paying out of pocket for that. So I think that there are things that in the past, when people were thinking about an ADU and sharing utilities, it wasn't really as big of a deal because you just could really pass the cost on in the rent that you were charging. But as the legal landscape around landlord-tenant laws are changing and we're having these emergency ordinances, I think it's having a lot of property owners think a little bit differently, and it's making it more important for people to want to pay the extra cost to be able to separate out the utilities and have the client pay for that themselves. So it's a very interesting space that we're in right now. And I think just the realities that we're facing around us within the last little over a year have really kind of started changing the conversation we're seeing around separating utilities.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why, you know, I think webinars like this are valuable for people because, you know, hearing from experts like you and Greg who are actually seeing these things in the field is so important, because otherwise, you know, part of our role at Maxable is we don't want there to be a bunch of surprises for you down the road where, you know, things that you hadn't considered and thought about. So, you know, we want to try to expose everyone to as much of this as possible. Let's talk about solar. Obviously, that's another kind of thing that's going to impact your utilities in a big way. What are you guys seeing? I mean, I'm assuming that, you know, solar is triggering, or most of these ADUs are going to have to upgrade their panels. That's just kind of a given, because a lot of these panels are, you know, not sufficient to handle the load, maybe even of the main house at this point with the way kind of technology has progressed, and certainly not the additional load of an ADU. Greg, can you talk a little bit about that process and what you see and what the cost associated with that is?
Sure. What the first thing that we'll address is the panel and the actual power that's provided to the majority of the homes in California. When your house was built, unless it's fairly new, it probably had a 90 amp service or a 100 amp service or a 125. And what's required on the ADU is a minimum of 100 amps just by itself. So almost the same as your main house that you've been living with forever, that I'm sure you've probably plugged in a hot tub here or this or that, and you've had more than adequate power. But now they're requiring that same size of a service or panel or power to your ADU. So with that, you're going to have to put a minimum of 100 amp panel onto your ADU, and which means that your 100 amp service to your house needs to be upgraded to 200 amps. The 200 amp service can be fairly costly to do depending on your utility company again and what they're going to require. What we're finding is overhead power has been the least expensive, because in our particular area, the majority of the power is provided by PG&E. But PG&E will run the line without additional cost. If you're underground from PG&E's service to your house, they're actually making the homeowner do the upgrade, which could be anywhere between $7,000 and $15,000 or more, plus the taking up of concrete and moving different things in order to accommodate that. What we found with the the addition of the solar is that a lot of people have desired solar on their main home. And now they have the opportunity to sit there and go, well, I'm being forced into putting solar on my ADU. Why don't I research doing it on the main home? And Florentine has some wonderful ideas that me and her talked about yesterday, as far as the savings and the rebates, which I'll let her talk about in just a second. But phenomenal ideas with re-roofing your home and things like that can all be included. So basically what I'm saying, Caitlin, is that the panel on your main house will probably need to be upgraded. That's in addition, you already have your meter. The meter is probably fine, but the sub panel or the panel that creates the power, where the power comes in, will have to be upgraded to 200 amps at a cost of, I've seen it anywhere from $2,600 all the way up to $7,000. And that's for a 200 amp panel. We're usually about 3850. So we're in the lower realm on that. But in some instances, I've seen ADUs be upgraded, or the main panels needed to be upgraded all the way up to 400 amp service, which can get quite costly, because ADU, when they added a hot tub or things like that, and a car charger and et cetera, require a huge amount of power, which means that you need to upgrade up to that 400 amp panel. So solar is a good thing in concept, and when it keeps getting refined and they're able to do storage and things like that, it's going to be awesome. If you can sit there and somehow figure out ways to incorporate your ADU solar onto the roof of your main house, there's many advantages. And Florentine, please add to that. That was awesome yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've just oftentimes when people are thinking they need to re-roof their main house, we will oftentimes ask if they're interested in solar. And the reason for that is that we do still have really great solar rebates right now. It's my understanding, I just talked to my solar contractor recently who said that the 26% rebates that were supposed to go down to 23% this year, I believe they're maybe being extended a couple more years. And so there's still an opportunity to get this great rebate. And if you have to re-roof your house, if you have an old roof, you don't want to put a new solar system on an old roof, because then you'll have to re-roof it again in a few years and take the solar off and put it back on. So typically, if you are wanting to put solar on a home that has older roofing, then what you'll need to do is you'll need to re-roof it as part of the process. And then you can oftentimes get the 26% off of the re-roof as well, in addition to the cost of the solar. And so it really ends up, I mean, the solar, I'm not going to say it totally pays for itself, but a big chunk of it's paid for just in the rebate you're getting back off on the roof that you needed to do anyway. So there are some really strategic things, when we're working with homeowners, we're always trying to be strategic and look at their whole big picture, and make sure that they're getting as much value as they can and doing things in the most cost-effective way as possible. And again, because the solar rebate is going to be running out. I mean, I believe it may have gotten an extension. I would need to verify that, but it is going to be running out. It's not something that's going to be available for much longer. And so you might as well take advantage of getting that rebate.
Yeah, it's interesting. We put solar on our house this past year, and actually one of the things that we discovered in investigating this is that if we were to upgrade our panel to a 200 amp panel, that expense, because we were doing it for solar, that expense is also part of the tax rebate, just like you're describing, the roofing being part. So like, if you play your cards right on this, you could actually save yourself literally thousands and thousands of dollars and get solar, which is definitely exciting.
Yeah. Well, or if you're wanting to do an electric car charger, or some of these things really, you need to upgrade your panel. That's part of the solar, right? So you already need to do this panel upgrade because of the ADU. Why not get a percentage off of that because it's part of your solar project?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really makes really good sense. I'd
Such
like to.
Such a great catch. That was such a great catch, and that's something that I'm going to be utilizing. I learn something new all the time, and that's why I love to talk with people that are in the business. That's just a phenomenal catch.
Yeah. I'd like to piggyback off of something that you had said, Greg, about you know, the panel upgrades and the need to upgrade the panel. We're seeing that a lot here in Southern California. A lot of these older houses, you know, they do have a 100 amp or less going into the main house, and that always will need to be upgraded. And these are some of the things people don't think about. Sometimes people have an unpermitted garage conversion and they've got power going out there and they're like, oh, can we just use the power that's that's already going out there? But a lot of times what they don't realize, everything has to be upgraded to 2020 building code, and you're going to have enough power servicing the whole house. And so the house and the ADU. And so, you know, based on building code, not just based on, you know, what someone jerry rigged up there. So it's always, these are a lot of the costs that people don't often think about, the utility costs, and they can be substantial in a project. And we did do a project where just this year we're working on wrapping it up, where, you know, the client wanted to do all electric in the ADU, and we had to have a 200 amp panel just for the ADU because it was everything. It was their mini split system. It was their water heater. It was their washer dryer, their stove, their refrigerator. I mean, everything was all electric. And I think it can be really smart if you're going to do solar. It makes sense to do it all electric. We're not able to get away with that in a lot of jurisdictions here, certainly not in the city of LA, and a lot of the cities down here, just because of the Title 24 energy requirements that are part of the building code in California, make it challenging when you're building in small spaces, because there's certain calculations that you have to meet for window glazing, for insulation, etc. And that also includes your electricity load. And so oftentimes it makes it hard to do all electric. So I just want to put that out there as a caveat. Oftentimes we can't do all electric, but, you know, in this case, they did want all electric. It makes great sense if the electricity is going to run off of the solar. But it did require a pretty substantial upgrade. We did need to bring the 400 amps into this home to make the all electric ADU work. And that was only a 440 square foot attached garage conversion. It wasn't a 1,200 square foot home. But when you calculate the load of all of the appliances that are going to go in, that was what the requirement was.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
One of the things that's coming up that is a potential issue is that the utility itself doesn't have the capacity to service a lot of this. We ran into it in Northern California in one of the cities up there, that when we called PG&E telling them that we needed just a 200 amp panel upgrade, they said that they didn't have the capacity with transformers and that it would be quite some time, year or more, before we could get that upgrade. After much negotiation with them, we obtained the upgrade, but the infrastructure is not there, especially for all these cities that are going with reach codes that are requiring all electric. There's a huge demand that's coming up that will be difficult to meet. And that's why a lot of the utilities are requiring the homeowners to do the infrastructure upgrade at a substantial cost.
I think this transitions us really nicely into our next topic, which is gas. So I think when we look at electricity versus gas, and, you know, should homeowners plumb a gas line to their ADU, which is funny because in some jurisdictions we're seeing that that's mandatory. They won't let you build the ADU without the gas line. And then in other jurisdictions like San Jose, they're requiring you to go all electric, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense for you. And I think that one of the biggest impacts of, you know, kind of looking at all electric versus gas is actually your water heater. You know, because that is you know, takes a lot of power to heat a lot of water. So maybe we could talk a little bit. I know that homeowners are really excited about the tankless water heaters. That's something we installed at my mom's ADU, and it's worked fabulously for her. It takes up so little space. It's external to the unit. The water heats up and is fast. So what are you guys seeing in terms of, you know, of having to plumb gas lines, of, you know, tankless water heaters versus gas water heaters? What are you guys seeing in the field?
Well, the water heater issue, again, I'm right in the middle of a huge debate with one of the cities on this right now, and it's causing some serious cost to the homeowners and the ADU people that want the ADUs, and these are supposed to be affordable housing units. When you start looking at an actual reach code or all electric, the tankless electric water heaters are about 60 amps just by themselves. Now, if you have a 100 amp panel on your ADU, you don't have enough power again. That's where Florentine was talking about having to upgrade to just 200 amps for just the ADU. So it's difficult. So what you have to do in order to meet, and they don't meet Title 24, by the way, which is a California energy mandate, and it's a code that you have to meet, and that affects how many windows you could even put in your house and things like that. So with the electric water heaters, you have to do what's called a hybrid, which is a heat pump water heater. Now, the heat pump water heater isn't an external mount water heater like you have with a gas tankless water heater. It has to have its own room. So now picture this, you have a 400 square foot ADU, and now you're going to be sharing it with a water heater. So in the past, when we're able to run gas, we can sit there and put the gas water heaters on the exterior of the ADU. Now we're taking an additional 12 square feet out of your 400 square foot ADU and saying, hi, water heater, you now live with us. So what's happening, and the cost alone on that, they don't look at just the cost of the water heater, which is more expensive, but now you have construction costs. You have wiring, you have the sheetrock, you have the framing, you have the roofing, you have everything that goes into construction. You now have to build for a water heater instead of for your elderly mother or your adult child or whatever you're building your ADU for. So I'm not a big advocate of the reach codes in an all electric unit from the standpoint of, if you're looking at it strictly from affordable housing. If you're looking at it as, yeah, I just would like it in my backyard for my friends, my neighbors, my in-laws, my pool. Well, yeah, all electric is real easy to accommodate. And if those extra costs aren't a burden, then sure, all electric can be fine. And the heat pump water heaters are actually really good. It's just that in the affordability issue, it's taking the affordability component of the ADU and pretty much destroying it. But it doesn't appear that that's been analyzed. And that's what my biggest gripe is today when I was on this conference call earlier, is that you didn't do the research in order to look at the costs involved. And the main thing is that over time, it'll save money. And I'd still like to see the proof of that, as well as we're trying to provide affordable housing now. Down the road, things will be changing. It'll be a different environment. So as far as gas, I love FAU units, forced air units that blow the nice hot air in, and you can put your blanket over it and get nice and toasty. But there's some phenomenal units out there right now that are called mini splits that you can do zonal temperatures. So I can heat up my bedroom or cool down my bedroom and leave the living room area wherever that would be comfortable for the person in that area. So as far as running gas, it definitely has its pros and cons. The biggest pro is in water heating, and to do a tankless water heater on the exterior of the unit is, in my opinion, the biggest attribute of gas. Otherwise, all electric is fine.
And also, if you're a home chef.
If you're a home chef, absolutely, absolutely.
I gotta admit, I really like cooking on a gas range as opposed to electric. It's just not quite the same.
You got me there.
Hey, they're coming out with some new electric ranges though that chefs are swearing by. So you might have to, be open. It was I was at a net zero conference last year before COVID, when we can actually all go to a convention together. I was at the net zero conference and learned about some pretty hot new glass top ranges that they're coming out with. So
it sounds like the restaurants in San Jose are going to have to take advantage of those, Greg.
they're going to have to, yeah. Some induction cooking for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that, having attended the Net Zero conference, I do get that as a state and probably as a country, we are moving away from gas. That really is the ultimate goal. And I think that is the intention of things like the hybrid heat pump water heater. but we're not there yet, and we have some competing issues. So for an example, my water heater went out about a year ago on my main house, and I had looked, and I had a gas water heater, and I looked into getting a heat pump water heater as a replacement. Now, to change out all my gas lines and put in electrical was going to be a cost all its own, in addition to the cost of the unit. But I couldn't even find a unit. I could order one that would have taken about 3 to 4 weeks to arrive, which I wasn't about to go without hot water for 3 to 4 weeks. And the closest one I could find, I live in Los Angeles, the closest one I could find was in San Bernardino, and there was no one going to deliver it to me. So I would have to drive out to San Bernardino from Los Angeles to pick this thing up. I called all the supply houses in town. No one carried them. So they're not common enough. They may be common in San Jose where people are forced to use them, but they're not common here. I mean, and we've got millions of people living in LA, and I was surprised you couldn't even find them.
Yeah, it's not like you're in a podunk little town there. Most people have heard of Los Angeles. So.
No, I was surprised, and I had, I'd been to the net. I mean, I thought heat pump water heaters, this is the greatest next best thing, and then also trying to find a plumber who's ever installed one in Los Angeles. They're not common here yet, and I was really surprised to find that. So I think these might be cutting edge. I think, again, for small spaces, though, a lot of the energy code, the California Energy Code, the Title 24, it is really written for large houses. And how do these calculations work for a large house? And I don't think that they really are taking in consideration the efficiencies that you already have with a small space, right? So when you're in a small space, you're heating and cooling a much smaller space. And so they, by virtue of, their smallness, they carry with them a form of energy efficiency. So here we are, we're trying to meet the energy code that was created for larger homes, and we're trying to meet it in this really small space. And I think that's some of the work that Casita Coalition is working on right now. One of the working groups that I've been working on there, where we're looking to propose legislation, we're really looking at what can we do to affect the energy codes or the way that they're applied to these ADUs, because ADUs, they should be a very sustainable form of housing because they're a much smaller footprint. Right. But the way the code's written, it doesn't really, I feel like it really ties our hands for being able to employ some of these alternatives just because of how the code's written.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caitlin, can you just share just a little short segment on the Casita Coalition for the listeners?
I'd be happy to. So the Casita Coalition is a statewide nonprofit that is working on ADU advocacy issues. So my co-founder sits on the board of that nonprofit, and I sit on the advisory board. And a lot of what we're doing is talking to professionals that are in the field, talking to homeowners, and trying to understand what are the biggest pain points, whether that's expense or regulations or just hurdles that they have to overcome in being able to build their units, and how can we help impact legislation to smooth the path for them and get rid of some of those headaches that they're encountering, and really make sure that we have compliance across the state with what needs to happen. So it's a really fantastic nonprofit, really amazing. Denise Pinkston, who's the board chair there, is just an incredible woman. So it's really great to see. I mean, we were working with a homeowner that was having issues with water credits. It was Monterey. And they were requiring water credits, and they were going around in circles trying to get these water credits, and just having a hell of a time. And we escalated that to the Casita Coalition, and they stepped in to help out there, and they're working on it. So it's really exciting to see. I think for homeowners who are maybe hearing like all of the complexity here and thinking, God, is this something that I want to tackle? Know that one, there are amazing professionals that want to help guide you through this process, and who have literally Jared Basler, my co-founder, he's designed and permitted 100 ADUs. People like Florentine, people like Greg. I mean, these are experts that really know their stuff and are in the trenches and are your advocate. They're on the same team as you. And so I think working with experts who really understand the space is so critical, because ADUs are a brand new industry in some ways. Like, yes, of course, the mechanics of building a house, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here, but from kind of a regulatory standpoint and looking at existing lot constraints and kind of the difficulty of small spaces, it's its own kind of own beast, which is, part of the reason why we really want to recommend that homeowners work with companies that specialize in this particular field. So I think that actually goes well into my next slide. I'm going to go back to sharing my deck again. I just thought it would be nice to see everyone's faces a little bit more. But my next topic was, how do I vet and find knowledgeable teams for my ADU? How do I find the Florentines? How do I find the Gregs, for my project? And that's really where Maxable wants to help. We want to help be a connector. I mean, we work with teams all over the state. We talk to homeowners. We see projects going up. We're really plugged into what's happening, and so we're building these partnerships with really wonderful, lenders, designers, general contractors, design build, prefab companies, so that we can help you guys get connected to who you need. And so one of the services that we offer here is a home evaluation, which is, a one-on-one consultation with one of our consultants that is going to help look at your property, research your property, understand what the constraints for your property is, and be able to connect you to the service providers that you need to complete the project. So that is a paid service that we offer. It's $199. And so, I'd encourage, if you're thinking about a project seriously, it's a really affordable way to kind of get that introductory information that you need to be able to start your project off on the right foot. And then, here's some of the clients that we've worked with that now started at that home evaluation process with us and are all the way now where they're renting their unit or living in their unit or have their children in their unit. And so, that warms my heart. I love seeing that part, and it's my favorite part of my job. So we want to be your guide, and we want to help you through this whole process. So I think the next thing we've got, let's see, 10-ish more minutes. I would love to get into some Q&A, because we had a ton of people submit questions, and I know those are really valuable to listen to. So Sadie's got some questions for us that she's going to feed, and then we can get through as many of those as we can in the next 10 minutes.
And Caitlin, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about water or sewer. So if there were any water sewer questions, those might be good ones as well to tackle.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Sadie, do you have some questions for us?
Yeah, someone asked, what are some common site limitations that may stop a project?
First ones that come to my mind would be easements. The legislation's written quite well to allow you to build an ADU in your backyard. The big thing that is a showstopper is if you have an easement running right through the center of that, you'd need to either sit there and try to negotiate the easement out, or you try to negotiate some sort of building easement on top of the easement, or there's a number of things that you would need to do. But that's the number one thing that pops to my mind immediately are easements, because setbacks aren't as much of an issue anymore in that the new legislation, SB 13, AB 68, and AB 81, allow you to build within 4 foot from your property line, provided that there's no easements. That's one of the things. There's a cost savings there too. If you go 5 feet, you're not going to have to do firewalls and things like that. Firewalls can add up quite rapidly. So by adding that extra foot, if you can do that, it does save you quite a bit of money. But the big thing is that I find are the easements that are on your property, and you need to find those out. You could find those either in your title report from when you bought the home, or there are some GIS sites that you can find them, or call a good qualified builder and they will do a lot of that legwork for you. Maxable is so incredible with that it makes my job easy. When I get something from Caitlin, it tells me what I need to know in order to make sure that we can make a job go smoothly and go forward.
Awesome. Florentine, any additions to that?
The only addition I would say is that utility easements have gotten a lot easier to make our way around than they used to be prior to 2020. So, we used to have to, it was about a 6 to 8 month process just to go through utility review. And that's going a lot quicker now. It's about 3 months. And what we're seeing is that it's a lot easier just to apply for an encroachment permit. And a lot of times those are being approved. whereas prior to 2020, they weren't. It was more of a toss-up in terms of was it going to be approved or not. And then the costs were upwards of about $7,000 in City of LA to get an encroachment into the easement, whereas they've eliminated that cost. So not only is it faster, but there's also less cost. When we do know that we're going to have to go through an encroachment process, that's one of the very first things we do before we even submit plans. While we're still working with the client, getting the designs created, we're already submitting for that encroachment so that we don't have to. And the encroachment is what allows you to build in an easement. So we're applying for that early on. So we're working very strategic to try to save time on the project. But that's the only thing I would add is that they've become a lot easier in LA County.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just add, this isn't so much of a site constraint, but one of the things that we're seeing that's kind of backing people up on projects is that the financing is taking a very long time to close. So I was talking to a client the other day who applied for financing mid-November, and her loan just closed a couple weeks ago. So because interest rates are just at an absolute rock bottom right now, and it's so cheap to borrow money to do projects like this, the lenders are really overwhelmed with the volume that they're receiving. So that's another thing. It's not obviously specific to your site, but financing is a big barrier or a big hurdle to overcome. And so the earlier you can kind of start on that, Florentine's talking about parallel processing to make things be efficient, that's something that could certainly help move your project along quickly.
Exactly. And I think in terms of other things that could be roadblocks or add cost, if you're on a hillside or special grading area or in the coastal area, probably it's going to add time and cost. If you're, again, hillside or special grading, you are going to have to do a soils report for us to even know what we can build and what the foundation structure is going to look like. And those soils reports can be, $5,000 to $8,000. And we've had homeowners that just decide they don't, people want to know what their project is going to cost. Well, I have no idea what kind of foundation system we can employ on your property until we dig down and see how deep the bedrock is, as an example, or whatever the soils engineer wants to do. And so a lot of people aren't willing to invest that kind of money up front, but that's why the work that you guys do, Caitlin, of determining, is it in a hillside area? Is it in a special grading zone? It helps the homeowner know up front, because any company, you can hire any company to drop a set of plans, but if you drop a set of plans, submit it to the city, and the city goes, wait a second, we need you to go back and, do a soils report that you weren't anticipating. What if it makes it so that your project isn't feasible? What if all of a sudden you're having to, and do caissons or piers or something, and you're just like, it's going to add $100,000 just to do the foundation on your property. All of a sudden that may not make the project feasible, and you didn't know about it. You invested this money into plans rather than doing the feasibility first. And I think that's where the work that you guys do up front, doing that research and letting the client know this, it's worth every penny before they pay the thousands of dollars to get plans approved. And then I think also when it comes to the sewer, a lot of times if the client hasn't replaced their sewer recently, or they don't know what the condition of the sewer is, one of the big things that we like to do is put a scope down the sewer before we even start doing the plans on the property, to understand what the conditions are of the sewer that we're likely going to be tying into, and also to understand how deep the sewer is. So what a lot of people don't consider is oftentimes, probably 9 times out of 10, we're connecting to the home's main sewer line, and we have to connect at the front of the property. Here in Southern California, in most jurisdictions, you're not able to just connect to the back of the house. You have to go all the way around, because what they don't want is if their sewer backup to, with the main house, they don't want that to impact the other unit. So we have to think about how far, usually the ADUs at the backyard, people want it as far away from the main house as possible. Depending on what that distance is and how deep the sewer is where we want to connect, you've got to hit a certain slope by code for that sewer to connect. And so, understanding the distance and the depth will help us know how we need to build this. Are we going to have to add a sump pump, which could add, $5,000 to the project? Or is there something strategic? Would it make a difference if we did a raised foundation versus building slab on grade? Should we relocate where the ADU is on the lot strategically? We need to know these things before we ever start even designing, right? And so a lot of times those are